So it is time for the list of my favourite movies of 2023. Now this list is only going to feature independent, low budget B movies, and they're all going to be kind of horror or horror adjacent films. I've decided not to kind of incorporate mainstream movies into my top 10s this year because I just don't feel it's kind of like a like-for-like comparison. So I'm just keeping it to just kind of obviously low budget B movies, independent films, things like this. Yes, there's plenty of films that I liked. I've seen Godzilla -1, I liked it, but I'm just keeping this to, as I say, the independents, indies, that sort of thing. So let's kind of get cracking. There are going to be some controversial ones on here because I know there are some films on my list that I'm looking at the comments of the reviews, people did not like them. And I obviously haven't seen every film that has kind of come out. So this is obviously only going to be based on the films that I have seen. And unlike my worst, I am going to do an honourable mention because there was a film that I reviewed that I got sent a screen for in 2023. But it actually got released in Italy in 2022. So technically speaking, it's a 2022 film, not a 2023 film, but it was kind of released in the West, in the UK and America in 2023. But like I said, so we're going to go talk about that briefly first, and that is one called The Blacklight, which I actually scored 8 out of 10. And it's kind of like a supernatural action kind of thriller film. It's more of a crime thriller than a kind of horror, to be honest with you. But it was a really kind of fun, kind of like 90s style kind of crime caper. We had a lot of these kind of come out after Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, and it's that with a kind of a supernatural kind of element as well. I really enjoyed it, but that's only my honourable mention because technically speaking, well, it's actually down as a 2021 film, but that I don't count sort of festival releases, but mainstream release was 2022. So that is my honourable mention. Anyway, let's get on with the top 10 list, shall we? Okay, number 10 is one called Eevee. And this one I scored 7 out of 10. And it's a very slow burn film. It is a kind of horror movie, but it's more of a psychological horror film. And it's about an adult brother and sister who have been estranged for many years and have come from like a tragic past. And both of them are very damaged. And they're kind of trying to kind of reconnect, but there may be elements at play here that are, shall we call it, problematic. It might be psychological or it might be something supernatural. That's kind of all I'll say on the plot there. But I thought this one was a very thoughtful film. I thought it was very well written. And the thing that really struck me were some really solid performances. This was kind of like, you know, a kind of like a dramatic film that you would get as kind of like a, you know, an awards-based kind of style film, but with a kind of a genre feel to it. Really great kind of central performances. Very slow paced. It's not a flashy film. And it's somewhat kind of ambiguous as to what's going on. But if you like a thoughtful, slow burn movie, then I would recommend Eevee at my number 10 spot. Next up we have Lord of Misrule. And this was actually quite a recent movie that I've reviewed, and I also scored this one a 7 out of 10. And it's kind of a folk horror on the lines of The Wicker Man. Now, arguably, it's not the most original film, but it's so well filmed. I mean, it's just like an absolutely beautiful film to kind of look at because it's so kind of like ethereal in its kind of like cinematography. And it's effectively about this kind of, this parent who's kind of the local vicar whose young daughter goes missing, and this kind of local kind of English kind of community seem to be keeping kind of dark secrets, and there may well be more to it than that. It's filmed wonderfully, some great kind of characters, and has a real kind of like macabre twist to it. More supernatural than kind of say like The Wicker Man, but it is a little bit more kind of like that than maybe it could have been. But it's a very decent film, very very well put together. So that one I thoroughly enjoyed. Next up, we have The Breach, which I scored 7 out of 10. And this is one film I know that it has its detractors. And this is kind of like an H.P. Lovecraft inspired movie where some kind of mutilated bodies kind of wash up on the shore of this kind of river, I believe it is. And we get a couple of people go in to investigate. And there may well be some kind of ungodly kind of experiments kind of going on. And we get quite a lot of kind of body horror. I think it's got a kind of a great kind of building atmosphere. It has this kind of H.P. Lovecraft feel to it, although it's not technically a a direct adaptation or anything. With some some really kind of like fantastical kind of elements to it. Some great kind of practical makeup and kind of practical kind of VFX. Yeah, so and I quite like the characters. Again, there's a few problems I have with this. You can obviously check the review out to see what they were, but I overall genuinely kind of like this movie quite a lot. Next up we have Herd, which is a zombie film, which again is one that I have seen some negativity about, but I really enjoyed this one. I thought this was an interesting take on the zombie genre, which is tried and tested at this make, and it introduces to some new ideas, which I thought were very, very interesting. It could have done a little bit more with them, those ideas, but I thought it was solid. But I thought the characters were kind of interesting. We get some quite nuanced kind of characters who are not always kind of bad guys, they're not always good guys. And as I say, some new things done with the actual zombies themselves that have great pustules and look very kind of gross and things like that. So that was all kind of quite fun. Number 6 on the list is a movie called Damire, which is, I don't know the budget of these films, but this is probably one of the higher budgeted movies on this list. And I believe this was based off a comic book, and it has a comic booky feel to it. And it's very much a kind of like underworld kind of style movie in some ways. The Damire is effectively an offspring of a vampire and a human that has the ability to ultimately kill vampires with a lot more ease. And we have this guy who is a vampire, although he doesn't kind of realise it, and he's kind of recruited to take out this kind of master vampire. And he gathers a couple of kind of allies, and it's very kind of slick. It's quite impressive, the world building in this movie. Again, it is based on a comic book. It's great kind of visuals, some great action, and some nice kind of like VFX and stuff as well. I think it definitely feels like a part 1 of a kind of a series of movies, which maybe to its detriment to a slight degree. But overall, I really enjoyed this one. Again, I give this one a 7 out of 10. Number 5, we have Don't Look Away, which is kind of like Annabelle, but with kind of a mannequin. And it's effectively about this demonic mannequin, which is particularly kind of dangerous, and it's only really able to be stopped if you kind of look at it, hence Don't Look Away. So the minute someone kind of looks away, it will kind of move. And it's not like a Chucky style mannequin where it's physically like moving around, but it's like kind of like, it has this kind of power, a bit like, again, like Annabelle. So you don't see it animated and stuff, but it's clearly a sort of conduit for some type of very kind of powerful entity, and it makes it really eerie. A lot of it is off screen. A lot of the kind of the violence is off screen, but it's implied quite heavily, and it gives that a disturbing feel to it. So I quite enjoyed this one, and again I gave that one a 7 out of 10. Next up at number 4, we have The Moor. And again, this is a very slow burn film and is kind of a dramatic horror. And it's about this guy who is searching for the body of their missing child, which was believed to be the victim of a serial killer some time ago. And he's kind of searching with his child's kind of now grown up kind of adult friend. And they employ a couple of other kind of people to help. And it has this kind of again, somewhat of a folk horror element to it, where we have this kind of nature, kind of like mysterious, kind of like things that are happening on the moors, and it's obviously filmed on there, and it looks terrifying. You know, it has this kind of wide open spaces and uninhabited kind of marshland, and it's home to these kind of like primordial forces and things like that that are simply too powerful to kind of comprehend. And yeah, so I give this one a 7 out of 10 as well. It was a solid movie, well acted, definitely worth a watch, providing you don't mind a slow burn movie. Number 3, this one I've seen on a couple of other people's lists, and it's actually a foreign language movie called Where Evil Lurks, and I forget which country this is actually coming from, to be honest, but it's a very violent film, and it's about 2 brothers who effectively are trying to get away and contain this kind of demonic kind of force which is tearing through this kind of local kind of neighbourhood. It kind of acts like a virus and causes people to do horrendous things, and this movie doesn't shy away from shocking sequences, but it's done very well. It's very well filmed, I think, well acted. It gets a little bit convoluted, I think, to be honest, but it's overall a very, very well put together movie, well shot, and kind of like, you know, the effects are top notch, and for the most part a very, very good story. So again, I gave this one a 7 out of 10. My number 2 is, again, this is going to be one which I know a lot of people don't like, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well executed, and this is Unwelcome. And I gave this an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed this one, and it's about this couple that end up moving to this kind of Irish village, and there's this kind of these garden kind of like gnomes or creatures, little kind of goblin things that, you know, a lot of people could have put down to legend, but the people who have lived there, they kind of know that they're real, and they're so well realised. And this kind of plays like a kind of somewhat of a kind of horror comedy. And we also have a secondary antagonistic force with this kind of like this Jippo kind of Irish kind of family that are problematic, that cause our couple some issues. But I just thought these kind of little creatures were so well realised, and I really enjoyed our couple. I thought they were quite a fun sort of couple. Yeah, and overall I thought this was a thoroughly entertaining movie, perfectly paced. So I gave this one an 8 out of 10. But my number 1, and this movie I adore it. And it's called Here for Blood, and I also gave this an 8 out of 10. But this is by far and away my favourite film of the year, if we're talking kind of low budget horror and things like this. And it's effectively this guy who is kind of like a wrestler gets roped into being a babysitter to step in for his girlfriend who's got to study for like an exam. But what he doesn't know is the girlfriend was actually targeted that night by a group of Satanists who want to kind of sacrifice her to their kind of god to open some type of interdimensional portal. But what they weren't counting on is for her to swap with her boyfriend, who is this kind of like big muscular wrestler dude who can handle himself. And as such, we have these kind of a variety of wacky kind of Satanists trying to sort of take out this kind of wrestler who's trying to protect this kind of young kid. And it's just fun. This movie is so charismatic, and it's so nice to see like a male protagonist front and centre in a kind of an American kind of horror film, because it's so uncommon these days. It's a lot of fun. All the kind of the bad guys are kind of themed. They have their kind of individual kind of like gimmick. It's pretty violent, and obviously if you're a fan of wrestling, the guy's a wrestler, so he's kind of using his kind of skill set about wrestling to kind of try and defeat them. It has some great kind of like comedy moments and fun characters, and overall it's just a real fun movie. It's not a deep film. There's movies on this list that are far more kind of serious and thoughtful, but this is just a fun, great time watching some a fun movie that captures a fun character with some over-the-top kind of zaniness, but also has some good horror elements and some good VFX and stuff as well. So I really enjoyed that one, and I gave that one an 8 out of 10. So that is my number one pick out of the entire year in regards to kind of big movies. Have you seen any of them? Do you disagree with any of my list? Obviously, I haven't seen every film, like I've said, so this is just based on the ones that I have seen. Anyway, I look forward to seeing your feedback on what we think about my list, and have I inspired you to maybe go and see any of these films? Please do let me know if I have, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time.